So, Dad, we didn't get to a lot of my questions, so I thought we would do a second interview, and I will ask the questions I didn't get to last time.
Okay.
The first question that I have, father of mine, is who I was named after. Who was I named after?
You really weren't named after anybody. I like the name. It first came to light when we were in Spokane growing up. He became a world-ranked light heavyweight boxer. His name was Kirk.
Kirk Burrow.
Kirk Burrow, yeah. Yeah, so that's the only thing I could look back on.
What did you like about Kirk Burrow? A black guy, right?
He was a good athlete as well. Played across town, which was a rival high school.
You went to Lewis and Clark. He went to North Central Spokane. And did he go to high school at the same time you were in high school?
He did. He was 2 years older than me.
And was he well known even back then?
He was, especially on the north side, because he had quite a reputation, yeah.
Yeah. When he became a boxer, you were following his career.
Yes.
In the 60s.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. He had sort of a tragic ending to his career.
Yeah. He was an undersized. They moved him up to heavyweight, and he just wasn't that big.
Yeah.
And they put him against some big guys, which was, in my estimation, a big mistake. He would have been a great light heavyweight had he just stayed in that category. But moving up a weight, you get some athletes or boxers that can really pack a punch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he experienced chronic brain injury from boxing and had cognitive decline?
Yeah, that's my understanding, yeah.
And then his later life was tragic and difficult for him.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah.
Lost touch with him after his boxing career ended.
So what was it about the name Kirk that you liked?
I don't know.
Because it's a rare name.
Fairly rare.
Captain Kirk was alive and well in Star Trek in the 60s, around this time when you would have been contemplating your next child's name, I suppose. Was that a factor?
I don't think so, no.
Because, of course, growing up for me in the 70s, that's all that I was referred to was Captain Kirk. Because that was, there's Kirk Douglas and Captain Kirk.
Yeah.
And so I got a lot of Captain Kirk, which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Because I love Star Trek.
I think as you've gotten older, you probably run into more Kirks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Yeah. It's not that common of a name, as I understand it, but there's more out there than we realize.
Yeah. Well, were you attracted to names that were rare? Because Colleen is not a super common name either.
Correct. I don't know where that came from. There was no planned naming process.
Just random.
Yeah.
I feel like back then parents just brainstormed for 30 seconds and then just pulled the trigger on a name. But what about my middle name, Joseph? Where'd that come from?
That was in honor of your grandfather on my mother's side, but there were several Josephs in your family history.
Yeah.
You had a couple uncles on both sides of the family named Joe.
So I was specifically named after your grandfather.
My grandfather, yeah.
Wahei.
Yes.
Who immigrated to the United States around 1900.
Yes.
And his Japanese name was Wahei Okamoto.
Yes.
But as a lot of people do when they come to the States, they will anglicize or they'll find an Anglo name like Joe or Joseph. And so he acquired that name when he emigrated at the age of 20 or 25 to make it easier on white people to say his name.
Right.
And he was known to a lot of people as Joe. And then that name actually started to become given names. Your uncle, Joe, that was his given name, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Joseph or Joe?
Joseph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would have called him Uncle Joe.
Correct.
And there were other Joes. Like, didn't Naoshi go by Joe as well?
Correct.
Yeah. There were certain names that Japanese immigrants would acquire because, when they're first here, that they probably are just like, well, what name did you take? Joe. Okay, I guess I'll take Joe too. And your mom's middle name is Josephine?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But specifically, I'm named after Wahei.
Yes.
Why?
I was closest to my grandfather on my mother's side. We used to go fishing together, and, he lived at the house for a while before he moved to our community, built a new church. We still had the old church, which was a block away from our house. And
wasn't he one of the founders of that Christian church in Spokane?
He was.
Japanese Christian church. He would have been Buddhist coming to the States.
Probably.
Yeah, not Christian anyway.
I don't know that.
So I'm named after your grandfather, your mom, your uncle, and your other uncle.
Yeah.
A lot of Joes.
Yeah.
So the listeners, when they submit questions along these lines to my parents, they're always curious as to any stories about me when I was a kid or a teenager. So do you have any good ones?
Yeah. I have a lot. You were very, I didn't see it, but like the time we took you to watch your older brother's karate class, you met the leader, the teacher, who was from Japan.
How old would I have been?
At the time, you were maybe like 2,
Okay.
because I was carrying you. I carried you.
Okay.
And the sensei came over to say hello. So he wanted to say hello to you, and then he just visibly kind of backed up, and he says, whoa, because at the time, I think, you were happy, you would smile, but you just kind of looked at him, and you didn't have much smile, but you just kind of stared him down, and he backed off from you, and he says, it was kind of comical, really, because he felt your energy, I guess. Yeah.
What energy was that?
I don't know. It was like he was, because you wouldn't smile. You just kind of stared him down. And he was like, oh, he says, he's very serious. And somehow he got this vibe from you.
I've heard other stories like that. Auntie Carol, your sister,
Yeah.
tells stories about how when I was around that age that she thought that I was judging people like quietly. Like she said she would be intimidated by me when I was like 3 or something. Do you remember other things like that?
Well, I just think that at the time, your expression wasn't, you were happy
Yeah.
and content, but somehow your gaze was, it kind of intimidated people, I guess.
Resting intimidation face or something?
I guess. I don't know. To us, it was just normal,
Yeah.
Well,
what other stories you got? What about the time, the tree?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a nice spring day, and the backyard back in those days was pretty natural. A lot of ivy on the ground and a lot of second growth trees that were quite tall. So I'm out there and I hear a, hi, Dad. And so I'm looking around, and I says, where are you? And hi, Dad. I look around, and finally I realize it's coming from the tree, and you're about 20, 30 feet up, and I'm going like, what the heck? First of all, how did you get up there? And I guess it's kind of a normal thing. And so, yeah, at a young age, you like to explore. Yeah, you like to get up there.
But yeah, by the time I was 7, we were climbing the tallest trees in our neighborhood.
Yeah, you told us that you get up there and you could see Mount Si.
And downtown Issaquah. I could see over everything. I was like in a helicopter up there.
Yeah, that's probably, you had a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
And
the acoustics were weird too. I could hear things that were happening all over the neighborhood,
Yeah, I would think so.
Because all the sound goes like up,
Yes.
I guess. And
Sure.
then it travels. And up there also, like, a little bit of breeze will cause that top of the pine to sway quite a bit.
Correct.
I'm just astonished that, and my friends, my 3 best friends, Charlie, Tommy, and Steve, would climb with me. But I think I was the most daredevil. I think I was always like, I'm going to go higher. And those branches don't look very sturdy. I'm like, I can do it. My hands are sweating now just thinking about it. And I did fall out of trees. I would fall.
I remember that. Secondhand, you'd tell me that you fell out and landed flat on your back.
Yeah.
It knocked the wind out of you.
Yeah.
So
Charlie and Tommy's mom was vacuuming inside their house and heard me hit the ground. From inside, she's vacuuming about 100 yards away. I slam into the ground, flat on my back, and she hears me and turns off her. I was like, what was that noise? Opens the sliding glass door and just sees me kind of, What other stories you got?
Well, let's see. When you were 2, when we first moved to the house, our next door neighbor had it was a German Shepherd mix that was a good watchdog.
Mm.
It would come out of the house, and they were up on another level from our house. They had a little girl.
Becky.
Yeah, Becky. Yeah. And she was almost...
She was a year older than me.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. She was my first big crush.
Yeah, okay. Well, I remember, so you were like 2. Somehow you had got up to their yard, and I came up there to get you, and their German Shepherd, who was, protective of their family. So I wanted to get you, but I didn't want to excite the dog by doing any quick motions or that kind of thing. Because at that time, I still hadn't pet that dog. I don't think they trusted other people, because it's basically a family watchdog.
Mm.
And you wanted to see Becky, so you went over.
No dog was going to stand in my way.
Yeah, so you were coming from the other direction. And I didn't want to get between you and the dog, but the dog was confused on who to concentrate on.
You or me?
Yeah. You didn't know the danger. You just went to her, and the dog was confused on which way to go. And I was like, to me, it was kind of a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
But somehow it all worked out.
Yeah.
I would still remember it.
I always have seen you, in regards to Mom, as the animal lover compared to Mom. The dog and the cat lover.
I guess so. Mom's family, they always had dogs. She loved them. She loves other people's pets, and that's it.
But for you, when you come over to someone else's house, my house or Colleen's house or Kevin's house, you'll spend hours just playing with the dogs, fetch or games, to the point where some of the dogs are excited when you come over because they know you will play games.
Yeah, I guess so. They call me the stick guy.
What about when I was a teenager? Any stories from then?
Well, let's see. I think you were a well-rounded athlete and person. Like I said, you used both sides of your brain. You were an excellent student. It seemed like things came to you easily. All of you kids, when new concepts were introduced to you, whether it's in math or science or whatever, you seemed to grasp it very quickly. And I always admired that, because for me, that wasn't always the case.
Mm.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, but I don't ever recall having to ask you to step it up in a certain class, or it was just never an issue. All of you kids, when you brought your report cards home, it was always very good. Mm. I don't recall ever having to say, can that be an A or that kind of thing. It's just like, I just figured you're doing well.
Well, one thing that, looking back, I think was happening was you have said that you think you have dyslexia, right?
I think so, in a certain...
What is it like when you're reading?
I have to read something several times in order to get the content.
What's happening in your brain when scanning the words?
I think my eye goes all over the page.
Yeah. Even though you're trying to focus on the words.
And what I'll do is I'll take a card and go line by line, and that helps.
Yeah.
So I'm blanking out everything.
Can you read fast, or do you tend to read slow?
I tend to want to read every word, wherever people will just get the gist of it.
Right.
I need to have every word.
Yeah. And you'd never been assessed or identified.
No.
Until you were 65 or something. I don't remember hearing you talk about it until recently.
Yeah, it's just an observation. I managed to get through school.
And at no point did you think that there was something different about your reading ability?
No.
You just thought, well, it just takes me a little longer.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think I got that from you. And I also, well into my career in psychology, had not identified that, because I had all these workarounds, and I guess I was able to mask it somehow. But I have it too, exactly as you described it. The thing that I tell people is that it's faster if I read out loud than in my head, which to most people is completely bizarre. But for me, if I don't say the words out loud, as you say, my eyes will skip all over the page and I'll have to start over. Or at the very least, I have to sound the words out in my head. I don't necessarily have to say them with my mouth, but I have to like think each word. And when I look back to when I was a young child in first, second grade, most of the activities involved reading. You know, there's a little bit of math, but it's a lot of reading, a lot of comprehension, a lot of story time, a lot of writing of sentences. And I was not good. And I saw myself early in school as a dumb person, kind of. Do you remember this?
No. You were such an excellent student. You got outstanding student awards. And
that was later, though. One of the very first times that I was wondering if I wasn't kind of dumb, not smart, let's just put it that way. Because spelling has always been really hard for me. I'm still very dependent on autocorrect. There are certain words to this day that I've given up trying to memorize where the letters go. And I think it's all because, and there's a lot of spelling contests, spelling bees when you're in the second grade. And so one of the very first times that I realized that I might not be on the dumb side, below average side, was when we took tests for math to place us in, because they had levels of math, right? Because there was like the high level, the average level, and the low level of math. And I tested into the high level, and I thought, wait, am I smart? Because I just took the test, and I thought, well, this is probably just going to not go so well. And I thought, oh, I thought I was kind of dumb. I mean, I didn't lament it, because there's not a lot of, at least in our school, there wasn't a lot of competition, really. There wasn't a lot of like, that kid's the smart kid, or that kid's I don't remember that being highly focused on. I remember being in like the 5th grade, and we would all go around the room and read a paragraph from a book, and I would be terrified at the beginning, like, oh God, I got 15 more people before it's me. Oh, my hands are sweating just thinking about it now, just how I'm going to fail, because as I would read it out loud, I would flub it. There were people that could just read it like they were just saying sentences, and for me it was very hard. And to this day, when I'm doing the podcast and I'm reading an email that someone sends in, I'll stutter because my brain, there's so many interrupts from the reading of the words that go into my head to comprehending what's happening to the spitting it out of my mouth. It's difficult for me.
My observation on that would be that you get the gist of it. You don't need to read every word. And you're way ahead of the game that way.
Well, I had workarounds, so I would infer based on context, but I'll get in trouble. Like, one of the things that I hated at the university is that most people would email really long emails when they have one point that they're trying to tell, right? It's like some administrator just wants to tell everyone that there's a new policy regarding submitting grades or something. And they start off like, hey, everyone, how was your weekend? Mine was interesting because I was stuck in the snow. Well, the weather's been kind of weird lately. As you know, we've been having meetings, just blah, 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 just get to the frickin' point, and then somewhere in that mess of words and letters is the detail that I need to know. And I would get so frustrated sometimes, particularly when I was kind of tired at the end of the day. I'd just be like, delete. I'd get like 3 sentences in and frustrated because, it's taxing on the brain. Have you ever run into that before? I mean, at Boeing, you must have had like memos and those kinds of things.
Correct. Yeah, there's an art to sending out those kinds of things to grab somebody's attention because, like you say, you may get several of those a day. And if you're wanting something to get noticed, it takes a real art to write it in a way that it grabs a person's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's take a break. When we get back, let's talk about Boeing. What do you say?
Okay.
So, Dad, I will briefly summarize for the listeners what I know about your career. You graduated from high school, and you didn't have a career path or goal or aspiration. You were a wandering soul, and you didn't really have any guidance. There wasn't anybody that was saying, hey, Alan, it's time to, you were just kind of, well, I guess I'll figure out what to do, right? You got a job at the Crescent department store,
Yeah, which was the biggest in Spokane.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Nordstrom or
Correct. Yeah.
fancy Macy's kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And you got a job working on the displays.
Correct.
You were identified by one of the established guys that would make the window displays as someone that has talent in that at the age of 19 or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
so he would have you do that, and you found that to be rewarding.
Yes. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I liked the people I worked with. I liked the creative end of it as well.
And you had always known that you could draw.
Yes.
You would draw like what when you were a kid or a teen?
Anything.
Yeah. People and landscapes and animals and
Yes.
just
Yeah.
doodles.
I didn't really doodle. I love comics, obviously. Superheroes, of course, Batman and Superman and Tarzan was big back then. So I love comics, because looking at the art and that kind of thing.
What was your favorite comic?
Gosh, I would say Red Rider.
Red Rider.
Yeah, he's a cowboy.
Cowboy.
Yeah, and he came out with his signature BB gun. All the boys wanted a Red Rider.
Just
BB
like
gun.
that,
Yeah.
the Christmas story movie.
Yes,
You'll poke your eye out or whatever.
that kind of thing. Yeah, and I was jealous. We had a family friend. They had BB guns.
Like multiple BB guns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we'd go outside and shoot those around.
Did we have a BB gun when we were? I feel like there was one in the garage kind of floating around.
I think we had a pellet gun.
Those are nastier.
They're nastier. Yeah.
By the way, when you were in high school around 1960, TV is starting to become a thing.
Yep.
What shows did you watch or like?
Back then, the studios would have children's shows. And I recall going down to the studio and being on a program.
Really?
Yeah.
Like a Howdy Doody kind of show.
Yeah. Yeah. And we brought, it must have been like Halloween time, because back then, if you go to a convenience store, you get these fake lips. They were
Wax lips?
wax lips, yes, and mustache and that kind of thing, or tongue, that kind of thing. And so we took those to the TV station, and when they would have we knew we were on camera. We would put these. So anyway, they didn't.
Were you
edit.
giggling the whole time?
Oh yeah, just
Because you were the
kids.
jokester.
Yeah, we were just.
But you were the jokester in the family and the neighborhood.
Yes, I guess I was. Yeah.
I suppose right now I should show pictures of you and your friends staging a fight.
No.
You guys are goofing around.
That is, I cringe when we.
But you're doing it with smiles and stuff, right? Or you're doing it in jest, or are you doing it serious?
I think we were. I don't know why we were doing that. It was just kind of crazy. I showed it to a friend of mine.
Those pictures?
Yeah, I sent it to him via email, and he was just like, "What was wrong with us?" And I don't know why we did that. Why we staged those pictures.
I guess I should also show the pictures because in terms of you being a clown visually for a photograph was you and your friends at graduation you have like a bottle of champagne or something, and
It's another one I'd rather not see again.
but that's hilarious though, because you and your friends are joking around. You just graduated and you're in your sort of flat top crew cuts and your nice jackets and stuff, and yeah, you and your friends would joke around and stuff.
We did.
Yeah. And while we're in this era, you were also a cheerleader.
My senior year, yeah. Somehow, a good friend of mine who played on a football team as well, he asked several members of the football team to form this all-male cheer squad. It's for the basketball season.
For the basketball, okay.
Yeah.
So you'd be side by side with the girls' squad.
Yeah, we didn't interact all that much because they had their own routines, but we would do 2 or 3 routines.
So you'd switch off with your crowd. You'd stand in front of the home stands and say, "We're going to do this cheer," right?
Yep.
Would you do dance routines, or
No, thank goodness.
it was just with those bullhorn kind of
Yes,
things?
correct.
Like shove them back, mush 'em ba, way, I don't know what they say. But I guess in basketball, It would be something like, defend the basket. I don't know. But that's, because then Colleen became a cheerleader.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Colleen, she was a good athlete.
Yeah.
As you all were. At that time, there wasn't that many, they didn't have a girls' soccer team.
They didn't?
No.
Oh.
They had basketball. But that was it, as I recall.
Girls' soccer at Issaquah, at least when I was there, was real strong.
Yes.
They went to state and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the friends of mine that were on that team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Colleen was captain, and it's very athletic. And I remember, because back then they would use those big pom-poms, those classic pom-poms.
Yeah.
They've switched to the little pom-poms, I think in the 90s, because the big pom-poms are like 15 pounds or something. They're really heavy.
Yeah.
And holding those for 4 hours and putting them over your head, you can get super tired. But so it was a very athletic job to be a cheerleader.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Boeing, you are working at the Crescent. You still don't really have a career in mind. And then somebody you came across suggested that you might want to work in commercial art, right?
Well, let's see. This was winter time. Washington State at that time was college. They had extension courses.
So Washington State University back then was called Washington State College.
They had art classes that they would have during the evening.
In Spokane?
Yes. And I decided, well, I'd take figure drawing or watercolor just to maintain my interest in art. And I was fortunate enough to get an instructor in the daytime, was head of the advertising design class at community college there.
So he was teaching just a regular art class.
Yeah.
But he also taught a commercial art class.
Yes, and he sparked my interest in. He says that I might be interested in coming to the school.
Because why did he say that to you?
He just thought I would find it interesting. And so this happened after we were married. My wife, Sue, after we had gotten married and had 2 children.
Yeah. So you would have been like 21 by this point or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that art class, was that where you painted those paintings that I have in my house?
Yeah. Right. That last time that I did oil painting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had your art in many of the houses that I've lived in. So yeah, I was going to say to the audience, and by the way, you're a very young father at this point and still aimless. The cart before the horse, the children and the family before the career. So you're probably thinking, I should probably figure something out, right?
As I look back, things happened going to the night school like that and meeting this instructor who was head of the department out at the community college.
Because you might not have even known about this career.
Exactly.
Or who to talk to.
Yes.
And God knows what you would have ended up doing.
Yeah. It was a 2-year program.
What do you think you would have ended up doing if you had...
I have no idea.
Do you think you would have ended up working in a similar job as your dad or your uncles?
Could have been.
Like in produce or at the railway?
Yeah.
Like more labor, more blue collar?
Probably. Who knows?
Because your brother was a teacher by that point, or studying teaching.
He was studying to become a teacher, yeah.
But that wouldn't have been something you would have been interested in.
No.
Too much public speaking. Which I can relate to, by the way.
Well, I could not see myself becoming a teacher. I wanted to be actually doing
something.
Art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but you did have it in your head that you might be able to make a living as an artist, like even before you took that art class.
I didn't.
Oh, okay. You were aimless.
It was, yeah. It was after I got introduced to the classes out at community college, which was intensive 2-year study.
And back then, Japanese people were kind of known for 2 things. They were known for gardening and art, right? That was the stereotype.
Yeah, I could do both.
Yeah. I've talked about this before, and of course you would know this, but when Greg Olson's dad, what was his name? Ed Olson.
Yeah.
He got me that job at Providence Point as a landscaper.
Yeah. I mean, when Ed asked me if what you were doing during the summer, I says, well, he says, do you think he could be a security guard? And I says, what? Security guard? He says, all it is this huge
retirement community.
Yeah.
A gated retirement community.
And at the age of 14?
No, I was at least 16 or 17.
Okay.
But the first job he got was the landscaping job.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing landscaping, and this elderly woman, white woman, comes up. And I was like the lowest on the org chart. I didn't know what I was doing. The team of landscapers were veterans. Some of them had been doing it for decades. And this elderly woman comes out and singles me out from the crew and says, I want to hire you as my personal gardener. And I'm thinking, and she's like, yeah, and I'll pay you. It was some astronomical number. I remember at the time I was getting, I think, $6 an hour. I think minimum wage was like $3.80 or $4.
Yeah, you're doing very well.
Yeah, $6 an hour is like, holy crap. But this woman was willing to pay me more than that, like $25 an hour or something. And I was like, I'm rolling in dough at this point. I mean, I think it was just like 1 hour a week or something, but still. But I was so confused because, she passed the 8 other people that knew about it way better than I did and walked past them and went straight to me. Plus I'm 16, or 15, like, why are you asking me? And at some point, maybe you actually told me, well, you know that, Asians are known for, and older people would have that, because by the time you get to younger people, like your age and younger, they would have had more experiences with Japanese people at various jobs, but that woman would have been probably born in the 20s or 30s and had extremely limited experience with Japanese people and just figured it's just in their bones, or they're born. I think you told me that, because I wouldn't have known that, and I don't think anyone around me would have known that. And it's just conjecture, but I'm pretty sure that's what was happening. But what do you think about that as a Japanese American who actually is good at art? Like, because, at Boeing, you ended up working with disproportionate amount of Japanese American guys.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, very talented people. I was so lucky to be influenced that way.
Yeah. So you are approached, or you get this connection that, hey, maybe I could work at Boeing.
Yeah, it was presented to me.
Yeah.
And that meant moving from Spokane.
Yeah. About a 5-6 hour drive across state.
Yeah.
Which means away from your family,
yes,
your friends, your community.
Correct.
To a very strange place.
Yes.
You're married right now. You have 2 kids.
Yes.
And you don't really have a career or a lucrative job at this point.
No.
So you get the job at Boeing.
Yep.
Around 67?
67, yes.
And your salary is like more money than you've ever made before, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And you're like, whoa, I'm a rich guy.
Yeah, at that time it was...
Wasn't it like $800 a month or something? Or how much was it?
If I made that first year, I think it was like...
12,000 or something?
Yeah, it was close to. Maybe not quite.
Okay.
But that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
At that time.
Well, if I type into my inflation calculator in today's dollars, that's $112,000.
Really?
Yeah. So it sounds like ridiculous, 12,000, but in today's dollars, that would buy you the equivalent of 112,000.
Wow.
So that's a pretty good, entry-level job for
correct
someone with basically no experience.
Yeah.
And so the commercial art division that you worked for was to create advertisements to sell to the airlines, correct?
Correct.
So you would have a new airplane or a new product or feature, and there would be a pamphlet that would go to the execs, Pan Am or United or...
Yeah, we supported sales and marketing in a commercial division, and we would prepare documents and sales and marketing materials that we would provide the clients.
And the salespeople would be there handing the pamphlets and walking them through it. And
yes, making presentations to the airlines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you worked at Boeing for 46 years?
37.
37
and a half.
37 and a half.
Yeah.
And Boeing had a very good pension program and a lot of good benefits.
Yes.
And Mom didn't really have to work for a long time. Eventually, she did have her own daycare at home, and you paid for a family of 6 to, have a good life and have abundant Christmases and pay for college and stuff. How do you feel when you look back on your career at Boeing?
I think I was incredibly lucky and fortunate to have good management.
Good bosses.
Yes. And our original boss...
Japanese guy, right?
Yeah, he sent 4 of us to management class. Actually, it was quite an honor to be selected to do that. I didn't see it that way because I could not vision myself leading an art group.
Why?
I was more into doing the work, because managing people, it takes quite an art in itself.
Yeah.
And
it can be really annoying.
Well, a lot of challenges there.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see myself becoming that. But he could see potential in me, I guess. That's why he sent me to...
Were you ever offered management?
There was people that I guess had approached my boss, unbeknownst to me.
I mean, it would make sense because after a while you had so much experience and seniority and you were well liked by the others, right?
Yeah.
So it would make sense that they would think that you would be a good manager. They might even think you would want management because you get paid more and stuff.
Yeah.
But you didn't want management.
I did not, no. I wanted to keep doing what I was doing.
Yeah. It's funny because, when I became program director at Antioch, it was similar. I didn't really want to be boss.
Yeah.
But I was being told that should be something I should do. And I also felt like I owed Paul a favor because he wanted to retire and he didn't think anyone had it sort of in the cards for them. And so I did it as a favor and I leaned into it. But once I was in the position, I hated it for all the reasons that I've talked about in the podcast before, including how annoying it is to manage dozens of professors, Yeah. So I quit. So apparently I follow in your footsteps in that way too, Dad. I thought you had told me years ago that you didn't want to do management because it would give you anxiety.
I don't recall that conversation, but I could see, yeah. Well, as you know, I mean, decisions that you make as if you're in a management position can directly affect your people's lives.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't please everybody.
No.
Someone has to lose.
That's right. And if you know the game, that's what happens. If somebody, in order to move up or get compensated correctly, your rankings, they would like to have it that way, where number one is always getting a good raise, but in order to be fair, you have to juggle things around. And I couldn't see myself doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a comfortable place.
Yeah.
So then you retired from Boeing, and Boeing has good beneficial programs for people. Why did you retire at 63? Could you have continued?
I could have, but I just felt like it was a good time. It just felt right to me.
Yeah.
Like they say, when you get to be retirement age, a friend of mine told me, he says, who was retired, and I posed the same question to him. He says, how do you know? And he says, you'll know.
Oh. And by the way, I just want to drop in here that you designed the logo for one of the airlines.
Oh, yeah, Angola Airlines, yeah.
And that the logo was on all the airplanes and all
Correct.
the documents. It was their main, because the logo of an airline is very important. You think of that Emirates on the side of the, or the Alaskan, or Hawaiian, or Pan Am, or United. These are iconic images, like McDonald's or Pepsi, and you created your own, and it is kind of you. It looks like in your style. Yeah,
it turned out fine.
It's a gazelle, right?
I think it's a black sable.
How'd you feel when you made that?
It was an honor, really. Surprised and honored that the customer liked it and said, let's go with it.
So throughout all your career, you're an artist. You like to express yourself. Like currently you're doing art, Japanese ink art.
Yeah. Sumi-e.
Sumi-e.
Yep.
And you like to, since you were a kid, you just want to express or try a new skill or enjoy making art. Throughout your career when you were making art, and whether it's a display or a pamphlet or whatever, did you get any kind of creative enjoyment from it?
Yes.
How so?
You can see it actually, well, if it's exhibit design, you can see it actually being produced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's shipped and then set up at the location. Mm-hmm. And then you can see how the general public reacts to it. Mm-hmm. And how does it work for the company that you're supporting? Mm-hmm. Does it meet their needs? Does it draw customers into your booth to talk business?
Mm-hmm. So why did you ultimately retire?
I just felt like it was time. It was, I don't know. It just felt like they're doing well. Everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Now's a good time.
It's funny the way you talk about career, because I think your generation is different than mine and people younger than me in that there's nothing in here about what you want. It's only like, well, they'd be okay without me. And, well, my friend, I always liked working with him, and he was in a bind, and so I helped him out. It wasn't like I wanted this, and it would be good for me. There's nothing in there. But I wonder if your generation, and maybe Japanese people also, that there's this implied selfishness. Because, it's your career. It's my career. I'm not doing my career for, I suppose I am doing it for other people, but I'm definitely doing it for me. There's a lot of my needs that I know I have and am trying to meet through my career. Probably first and foremost, honestly, at the very least, top 3 reasons. And so I want to know from you if you think that there are things of your own needs that are there, or if your generation thought more of like, well, you get a career because that's what you do, because you need to support your family. You don't really have the luxury of thinking about what do I want. It's just your duty to have a career.
Well, first of all, I feel fortunate that I was able to forge a career in something that I had a talent for, and it opened up a lot of opportunities for me and for my family. Provided good insurance, which really helped. Mm-hmm.
Health insurance.
Yes, health insurance and benefits.
Health insurance for your whole family.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And getting all of the major holidays off. Mm-hmm. Christmas time at the Boeing Company is always, they kind of got a lot of the national holidays. They saved them up, and so we would have like a week, sometimes a week and a half vacation during the holidays. Mm. So that was great. I always look forward to that. Yeah. So feel fortunate that I was helped a lot along the way. I feel like if I had a chance, I would do that for anyone else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, forward that.
Yeah, it's a good thing that someone was there to point aimless Alan in the right direction. Because God knows what would have happened otherwise. All right, let's take a break, and we get back. My final questions. What do you say?
Okay,
we're back from the break. So, Dad, you have been a lifelong golfer, and there's a lot of golfers in your family. Your dad was a renowned golfer as well.
Yeah. And
you played golf 2 or 3 times a week for many decades, right?
Maybe twice a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through the winter times, the snowy times, the rainy times, the windy times. Sometimes you'd be maybe the only one on the course because no one else would bother to go that day, right?
Yeah, actually, I found that I enjoyed golfing with my regular friends, but especially after work, if I was able and lucky enough to go out to a golf course, if there was nobody else, if I was all by myself, those are some of the best times I had.
Why?
It gave me a time to kind of unwind and enjoy what I was doing. Growing up, because there was so many other sports available, I remember my dad asking us boys if we wanted to golf, and of course we always thought, no, that just, I just couldn't see it as a sport. But after I got married, I started playing golf, then just loved it. Just fell in love with it.
What'd you love about it overall?
I guess it's the precision, and you have to play in all different kinds of weather conditions, and different kinds of courses, different kinds of terrain, different kinds of grass.
Did you find golfing meditative?
Yeah.
Because, it's a giant park.
Yeah.
That you're walking around in.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, especially if you're playing with three other guys, there's a lot of standing around just looking at the trees.
Yeah. Well, when you're with your buddies, there's a lot of joshing and
like, oh, nice shot, Al.
Keeping you update on how families are doing and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And there's just camaraderie and that kind of thing. So enjoyed that too.
Yeah. So unwind, what do you mean by that?
I was able to do something. It took my mind off of work and, pressures or anxieties that you'd have there. And
did you have those?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, whether things are going to get done on time, is it going to ship, is it going to get there on time, are the materials you need, are they available?
Were there dramas in your department? Conflicts?
Very few, yeah.
Yeah, my impression was your coworkers were pretty well-behaved and mellow. And
yeah, if there was any issue, it was very rare and very unusual.
Yeah. You're lucky because that's not the norm in any work environment. Usually there's a fair amount of chaos and conflict. Yeah,
well, Boeing was pretty, they have their customer relations, and if things got out of hand, there was people you could talk to. So it all seemed to work out. I think there was people that did have some problems. They were able to work it out.
So there was a security guard that you told me about once that I think had passed.
Yes.
That you liked. Tell me about him.
Oh, he was so professional. Even though I knew him by name, he was always very cordial. You could tell he's ex-military because he's always called me sir, and I says, I'm not sir, I'm Al. And he just couldn't get himself to say that. Yeah, I remember hearing that he had contacted a disease and that he was medically retiring, and so I made a point of going to the last day that he was at Boeing and had a nice little conversation with him. Yeah, I'll never forget him. He's a great person.
What was that conversation?
His words to me was, he just looked at me and he says, he told me, don't tell them everything. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, I remember you telling me something like that. What did he mean by that?
I have to think that, it's for everyone to kind of come away with what he meant.
Mm-hmm. But based on how you knew him, you might be able to take a guess about what he meant by that.
I think it's, just play it close to the vest.
With who? Everybody?
Yeah, I think, to me, it was more like at wherever you worked, wherever I worked. Yeah, where we worked, which was the Boeing company.
Yeah. Don't make yourself vulnerable.
I think that's kind of like what he was saying. So,
like if you have a complaint, don't necessarily blab it to everybody. Like be careful as to what you say.
Yes, exactly. Those things get misconstrued.
Yeah.
As it goes down the chain.
Right.
And said, "Oh, he's unhappy." When I just made a comment.
Right.
I'm fine. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that was it. He was just saying you don't need to broadcast whatever your plans are, and so I thought, to me that was good advice. I've held on to that for years.
I want to show the pictures of you modeling at this point. Tell us a story about modeling.
Well, a fellow designer, she asked me and a friend of mine. Actually, this friend of mine, Grant, his wife was the real estate agent who told us about the house in Sammamish. Yeah. She was tasked with designing fashion for an airline. And so that was her, just like me, I did the logo for this company on how the brand would be applied to the airplane and to different printed material. Her job was to present ideas for flight attendants, pilots, and professional attire, how you would dress in the business place, different outfits. So at first I said, no, that wasn't something I wanted to do. I'm not a model, but she was insistent.
Why did she choose you out of the bunch?
That's exactly why I said no. I mean, you got...
Well, when you see the pictures, you can see it, I think you had maybe if that one artist teacher hadn't shepherded you into the work of commercial art, you could have been a model. Well, so what was it like taking these pictures?
First of all, we happened to get into, we're in Nordstrom, right?
Downtown Seattle.
Yeah, and she did a good job on that and explaining.
So some of the pictures are in that office.
Yep.
And some of them are on the street.
Yes.
Where you're hailing a cab down the wrong way of a one-way street.
I put the blame on the photographer. He told me where to pose.
Yeah. So how did you feel when you first found out that your relatives and your family were interned during World War II, imprisoned? You were born in 1943.
Correct.
So you probably don't remember much about the internment around that time, but
no.
But at some point, you must have heard or learned that your grandparents and your aunts and uncles and cousins had been imprisoned during. You were not imprisoned because you were in Spokane, which was further away from the coast. So you and your family, your parents, weren't imprisoned. But how did it feel when you first heard about it?
It was really eye-opening because I didn't know that. They didn't share that information. The Japanese community, with everything that was wrong about the internment, I've read several books on it, and it seems like it was wherever this happened. By that I mean different cities wherever people were of Japanese descent were interned. When they returned from camp and started their new life, it was like something they didn't talk about. They just decided, move on. I mean, what good is it to talk about this? You got to, in Japanese society, there's like what they call gaman. Gaman is what can you do about it? And I think that was one way of them saying, why keep dredging that up? And it wasn't until that generation, the Nisei generation, which was the second generation in wherever people of Japanese descent had started.
Your parents?
Yeah, my parents. My grandparents were Issei, so that's the first generation. The Niseis did well. They returned. They did well in the war. The young men who served in Europe, they wanted to prove that they were loyal Americans.
Including the senator from Hawaii who lost his arm.
Lost his arm, yeah. Daniel Inouye.
So how old were you when you found out, do you think?
I would have been well into high school.
Wow. And how did you find out?
I don't know. I think it was just found out by accident. I saw a picture and I said, where's this? It showed my dad and his brothers and father and mother, and they were all in suits. And so I said, where is this? And they said, oh, that's an internment camp.
And it's so weird because you were alive during this time. It wasn't like ancient history.
Exactly.
You were alive when it was happening. You would have been around when people were getting out, because they would get out and come to Spokane. And you would think that those stories would be talked about by somebody. Like remember that guy we knew in camp when we were imprisoned, or, just conversation, something would come up.
Yeah, well, when I was quite young, like 7, 8 years old, I recall being with that family again they had 8 kids, and being over at his place, my friend Doug, his uncle, I remember him, he was wearing a short sleeved shirt, and his left arm was quite scarred. I don't know who told us, but I think I don't know if I asked what had happened to his arm, but it was explained to me that he was part of the all Japanese American 442nd Infantry, and that he had been shot by a German submachine gun. And wow, that kind of hit home. You read about that battalion, and then to actually see somebody who was in there and served. And many years after I had moved from Spokane, I found that my former barber was he was awarded medals for serving in Italy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were the most decorated group in I think American military history, or at least World War II.
Yeah,
because of their bravery. And so even those, because you'd think internment would be something that would be difficult to talk about, but to be celebrated as war heroes in what was considered by many Americans to be a very justified war.
Yeah,
it's not like Vietnam. So for those folks to not advertise or talk about it or refer, no one even says, hey, that guy was in the 442nd.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's just that even that was not talked about.
Yeah.
Because that would be bragging, right?
I don't know how.
There's also trauma.
I think it's kind of like Gaman.
Like your dad was a celebrated sports star in a lot of arenas.
Yeah.
That was talked about, right?
Well, yeah, it was.
Like in church, someone might say, like, "Oh,
yeah.
George Honda, he was a star in high school."
Yeah.
And you would think at least those war heroes would say, "Oh, he was a war hero."
Yeah, they didn't talk like that.
Yeah. Because I guess that would lead to having to talk about internment, maybe?
I don't know.
Because, the 442nd was very much in parallel, the no-no boys. And
right.
Because a lot of the guys in the 442nd were imprisoned, and they enlisted while imprisoned, wanted to say, we've been trying to tell you that we're loyal Americans. Why are we being imprisoned? What better way to prove ourselves than to sign up and go to war?
I know. That was during a time when they were being drafted. So these young men in the internment camp, they could see how the country was treating them and their parents. And they're saying, wait a minute.
Yeah. Which one are we? Are we the enemy, or are we Americans?
Because I'm okay. You're going to take me into the army to defend this country,
right.
but you
can't be trusted to live in my house.
Yeah, you've given
as a free person.
My parents 5 days to get rid of everything that they have and get on a train and be interned in a camp.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense. It's
they
really
give up everything, their business, whatever.
Yeah,
and then you're asking me to fight for your country?
Yeah, what? What is going on here?
Yeah.
And, so it was an exit, or I don't know, some sort of crisis for every individual, and some decided to go and say yes to the questions regarding I can't remember the questions, but are you willing to fight for your country? Are you a loyal American or something?
Yes, it was something like that. It was they questioned the loyalty to the United States,
right?
Or their
willingness to serve or something.
Yeah, that the Emperor of Japan was not.
Oh,
they didn't answer to him, or
right.
Yeah,
and if they weren't imprisoned, a lot of the guys absolutely would have. I mean, these were loyal Americans. Of course, they have ties to the old country.
Yeah.
That's not unheard of. Germans that emigrate will have German ties, Canadians that come to the States. It's not weird that people would have some tie to the old country.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that you're supportive of the imperialism
Yeah.
of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like, did you get angry about it when you heard about it?
It was in later when I was reading about it and wondering how would I have answered those questions.
How would you?
I don't know. I've told your mom, Sue. I said I don't know how I would, and she said you would probably do what your brother would do, or I mean, it was well debated in the camps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I mean, each path had it. I mean, there's no good answer. It's a lesser of two evils, but
yeah,
each has a very different implication,
yeah,
To fight means we're given a chance to prove ourselves
yeah,
and to be integrated into the army
yeah,
and to, in some sense, a middle finger to the United States of just like, you're going to treat us like this, we'll show you how loyal we are. But on the other hand, it's like you're just giving in to the oppressor. You're becoming like a slave, Why would you serve a country that imprisons your family? And by family, we're talking about frail old people, like your grandparents.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Zentaro Honda and Take Honda, very old and frail.
Yeah.
In these plywood shacks with tar paper and no insulation.
Correct.
No carpet, just planks on the ground.
Constantly dust coming in.
Yeah. In Wyoming.
Yeah, Wyoming.
Hot as hell in the summer and cold as hell.
Yeah.
Cold as whatever in the winter. And everyone crammed into these tiny little spaces, ripped away from their communities, their homes, their businesses, their possessions. Everything gets lost unless some altruistic white person decides to shepherd their stuff, and even that wouldn't work sometimes. No income, no essentially just released after World War II.
Right.
Many of which stayed in the camps because they didn't have anywhere to go. They post-war, they're still in the camps because it's like, well, where do I go? I don't have any money. I don't have any home. I don't have a job. Where am I supposed to go? It just completely upended an entire group of people for no reason because of racism. Did they do that to the Italians or the Germans in the United States? No. Gives me a very different feeling about FDR and the white people of the time. Makes me really fucking angry, honestly.
Yeah. During recent things that have happened, like 9/11 and that kind of thing,
And the
people of the Japanese
Islamophobia.
community have said and stood up and said, don't let this happen. What happened to us, don't let that happen again.
To Muslims.
Yes, and they supported them and said, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
Their hope was to shed light on, don't make the same mistake. Don't brand these people. If your listeners are interested, there's a book called Facing the Mountain, and that is about the internment camp that my grandparents were interned.
And your aunts and uncles and cousins.
Yeah, yes. And it's a good read. Even my aunt is mentioned in that book. Ironically, my mother's younger brother and his bride were married on Sunday, December 7th, the day of the attack. And her
Pearl
name
Harbor.
is mentioned in that. So.
Right. So your uncle,
Yep.
Uncle Joe,
Yep.
that I'm named after, your mother's beloved younger brother,
Yes.
he was getting married to Aunt Isumi.
Yes.
And what Grandma says is that they were driving from the wedding to the reception and they saw the newspaper headlines. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what's going on there? I mean, because there's not a lot of awareness of Pearl Harbor or what does that mean? And,
Right.
and then they're having a wedding reception, everything's fine, and then the FBI or the government shows up and traps everyone inside and starts questioning or interrogating and dragging people away, suspected collaborators with.
Yep.
So that must have put a real damper on the wedding reception.
I would think so.
Yeah. And then they're told to quarantine. They can't leave their house. So even though people in Spokane were mostly spared the camps,
Yeah.
They were still restricted. The FBI came to Grandma's house and took their camera.
Mm-hmm.
And
there was night curfews as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there was suspicion that Grandma was going to blow up the local radio station or something. I mean, literally, because they lived close to some power station or radio station.
They lived close to the phone company.
Phone company.
Pacific Northwest Bell.
Yeah. And they thought, well, she's Japanese. She's of course she's going to bomb something. And yeah. So what was it like regarding racism as a kid?
Yeah, that was hard growing up in a rather conservative city. And
it would have been easier if you were in LA or Seattle or something.
Correct, where there was more diversity, larger populations, because it was too close to the war, and you look like the enemy.
Right. So even though the war is over,
yeah.
the anti-Japanese sentiment was still around.
Sure.
A lot of people died
yep.
in the Pacific War.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. And Pearl Harbor was pretty hard to swallow.
Yes.
And all the propaganda.
Yeah.
And the slurs and the.
Yeah.
So how did it come at you? Like, what did you experience?
At a young age, I just remember my brother and I must have been like maybe 4 years old. I remember being in a yelling episode with my brother and I being harassed by some Caucasian boys who were older than us, and they were yelling. We were yelling back and forth at each other. That was we had no idea who they were.
So they just saw you as Japanese kids
yeah.
and started
yeah.
yelling
yeah.
slurs at you and stuff.
Correct. And we yelled back. And
right. Well, I mean, do you want to tell the specifics?
I don't. No, I just.
Right. So they yelled a specific slur at you.
Yeah.
And then you and your brother didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
So you just said the same slur back to them.
Yeah. That kind of stopped them in their tracks.
Huh? What about when you were a teenager?
Yeah, there was still some of that. Yeah.
Calling names?
Not so much heard about it, but being in a city where there wasn't so many people of color, sometimes you feel out of place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Mom says that you were a big man on campus. You were popular and well-liked and integrated. You know, you were on the sports teams. You were a cheerleader. You were well-known and popular.
That helped, for sure. But it's just like whenever you go to someplace new and you're by yourself, you're standing out whether you want to or not sometimes. Yeah. And I think everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, but you suffer that.
Yeah.
But people of color, you sometimes may think it's because of your color.
Mm-hmm. What was it like? We talked, me and Mom on the podcast about the early days of you and Mom dating,
mm-hmm.
and your family's reactions to your mixed race marriage, as they would call it.
Mm-hmm.
When you first met Mom, what attracted you to Mom?
She was, and she's just like she is today. I mean, she smiling all the time, and she was always smiling and laughing and so engaged, and that's who she is now. I mean, when we would go traveling together,
like later,
yeah,
when you
and so it's just the two of us, and then I would go to work, and I said, "Now, are you going to be okay?" And she says, "Yeah, today I think I'll go. I want to see this mountain." And I says, "Well, how are you going to get there?" She says, "I'll ask the front desk on, how do we get to this mountain, bus and that kind of thing." And then at the end of the day, I'd come back, and thank God she made it back safe and all this and all that. And she said how she navigated the bus system. And that's where I just admire that about her. She just says, well, I'll just get there. And I'm thinking, whoa.
You're more anxious about uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to know, this bus comes at 10:01, not 10:45, not 10:15. It comes at 10:01, and you got to be on this spot, and I'll be there well within that time, 15 minutes before. Waiting in line.
Yeah.
My mom is more, adventuresome. She's just
and you noticed that when she was in high school?
No, well, not that part. I'm just saying that she's much more adventuresome. Like what's around the corner?
And she's good at meeting people.
Yes. To me, I'm thinking, I see a corner. I don't need to know what's
on
around
the other
corner.
side.
But she'll go down and look.
Yeah.
And she's happy. She'll come back to the hotel and tell me, I met this wonderful lady and she's local and she helped me get the bus, which way to go. And I'm thinking, wow, that's.
Yeah, she just approaches people and she's really good at I don't know how you call it, but she can disarm anybody. you know? And she has no ego about any of that. If someone is going to give her the cold shoulder or something, she doesn't get upset or down on herself. She's just like, oh, okay, I guess you're not ready for me or whatever. So, Mom says, and I think you were saying that you were sort of dating her friend, right?
Yeah.
And then you took a liking to Mom instead. Your girlfriend's friend, you liked her more.
Well, yeah, I was fortunate enough to become a hall monitor when I was a senior. What that did for you was it got you out of 6th period study hall.
And you could scope all the girls.
Well, on all that, and I didn't have to sit for an hour, in study hall. And so each one of us it was 3 floors, our high school, and there would have been, so each corner, kitty corner, I think there was 2, 4, there must have been 6 of us or 8 of us. And you get a corner, and that's where,
So one person per corner per floor.
Yeah. Or there've been 2, maybe.
Oh,
so
2.
we had 2 corners. We just kind of, and Mom's 6th period class was right on my corner. And so I'd see her every day and how she'd come out and just smiling and, talking to people. And I thought, wow, who's this happy person? So it took me a while to kind of get up the courage to.
What'd you do?
I called her. Yeah.
Right. And Mom knew who you were, right?
Yeah, we had never met
but
before.
Knew of you.
Yeah.
Knew you were the big man on campus, and and that you were attractive, and that you were dating her friend. She knew that, right?
Yeah, correct.
So she's like, "Why are you calling me?"
Yeah. So it caught her by surprise. I'd never talked to her in the halls.
Yeah.
So.
How do you get her phone number? Is it just in the
I don't know.
directory
I
or
was just thinking the same thing. I
guess a phone book.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah.
And so you start dating.
Yes.
And then how fast do you fall in love?
I think, let's see. Mom can probably tell you exact date of our first. I'm thinking we had summer, maybe by winter time, about winter time.
So you started dating after your junior year? That summer?
After my senior year.
Oh. So you were about to graduate when you were a hall monitor.
Yes.
And so you started dating that summer after you graduated, and Mom still had a year left in high school.
Correct.
And then you're thinking 6 months later was when you fell in love.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And you would go to drive-in movie theaters and not watch the movies.
Yeah.
Mom talked about that.
Well, yeah, she remembers what movie we saw, but
not any of the scenes.
Yeah.
Was it your family car that you would drive?
Yeah.
Because you didn't have a car.
Correct. Yeah, I would use that car most of the time. That was kind of like Gary's car.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they had giant bench seats,
Yeah.
like couches.
Well, yeah, there's no divider.
Pretty easy to get comfortable.
I guess so. Yeah.
So you're falling in love and you're talking in the back seat of the Studebaker or whatever, and you're planning on having a bunch of kids one day, and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this person. But you're Japanese and she's white, so
Yeah.
like, at what point did that start running through your head?
Actually, it was probably in the back of my mind the whole time. Yeah. That's why we had to be.
Clandestine?
Yeah. Yeah. It couldn't be just out there.
Meaning that you didn't necessarily go to the front door of her house.
Did after a while. Finally.
But in the beginning, you didn't.
No.
So in the beginning, you knew you couldn't date out in the open.
We weren't sure.
You didn't want to take the chance.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know how her parents would react?
Or mine.
Or yours?
Yeah.
What were you worried that your parents would do?
I wasn't sure.
Had there been other Japanese people with white people in your community?
Not so much. Yeah, and certainly not anybody contemporary for me. You know, none of my friends or...
They would all date other Japanese American
correct.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was that freaky? Was that scary?
It was. Yeah.
Did it add to the excitement? Romeo and Juliet?
Well, maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe for Mom.
Well, Mom always contends that she didn't really see you as a Japanese person, really.
You know, Mom, I can see that.
Not that she saw you as a white person, but she just will claim that she would see through people's
yes, and
skin
she
color.
Still has that. She has that.
Yeah. But you saw it because it's hard for us people of color to not see it. Because it's always around.
Yeah.
And it's always being pointed out to us. So you're worried about it, but are you talking about it?
Not, well, I remember Mom saying she wanted to let her parents know.
Yeah.
And so that was the time that she told her parents that I had asked her out.
But you'd already been dating for a while.
Yeah, that's true. And so I remember that day, you know. And it just so happened there was other people at the house as well.
Were you there?
Yeah, I went to the house.
Oh,
yeah.
So
pick her up and then brought me, introduced me, and meeting her grandma and younger brother, Chris.
Grandma Amanda?
I believe that was her name, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? Were you, it's almost like, there's a lot of comedy movies about this.
It was, for me, it was awkward. But for Sue, it was like, it was fine, you know. Maybe them having company over and stuff like that when we met.
Yeah.
Maybe it made it easier for them as well because it wasn't so awkward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's a lot of twists and turns, but at some point, her parents say, that's it, you're done. And so the two of you went back to being clandestine daters.
Yeah.
And how did your parents react? Did you tell your parents?
I didn't.
So that whole time, you still weren't telling your parents?
No.
How did your family react once they knew that you remember?
Carol and...
Your sister?
Ron, and they just didn't say anything. You know, I mean...
But Auntie Carol and Mom were friends.
Yes.
So, and Auntie Carol knew because she was the one passing the secret notes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So she knew from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But how'd your parents react?
They reacted to, I believe, what Sue's father reacted. I think they reacted to that. It wasn't probably what they would wish for me, but I never heard them say, you know, that's over, you know, that kind of thing.
Your parents weren't super overtly communicative.
No.
Your dad in particular.
Correct.
Your mom also not very overt in her communication. It would be subtle or suppressed or,
Yeah.
yeah. You just had the sense that. So then you accidentally get pregnant, the two of you, while you're both 19 years old.
Yeah.
And what was that like when you found out?
Um,
She would have written you a letter or something, or called you on the phone.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that definitely gets your attention, right?
Because you're out at college at Eastern, right?
Yeah.
And she's at Wazoo.
Yeah.
And that's like an hour or two apart.
Yeah.
And so she calls you. It would have been spring that she would have told you, like April, May, June or something. She would have told you then.
Yeah.
But how did it feel when you found out? I mean, that's got to be mind-blowing to be that young and aimless Al. Suddenly, she's pregnant. How did that feel?
Well, yeah, a number of emotions go through you. And, of course, thinking we didn't know what we were going to have. It was a boy or girl. But so that was exciting for us. It was like, wow. Yeah, it was sobering for sure.
Sobering? How so?
Yeah. Well, I mean...
Got to get my shit together.
Yes, and you better do it quickly.
So you and Mom planned to elope, and then you did, unbeknownst to most people, your families in particular.
Yeah.
You inform your families that day. They're all told all of a sudden, not only is Alan and Sue together, because we didn't know, not only have they been together for years now, but they're married and pregnant. Your recent graduates from high school are married, pregnant, and together, and it's a done deal. So quite a shocker to everybody.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. But, and I went over this with Mom in her episodes, but her family eventually adjusted. You're relatively accepted into the family, and then eventually you become like Grandma and Mom's parents consider you to be their favorite. Not just accepted, but you and Mom were the favorite of all the kids in that side of the family.
I think it was a lot of it was your kids. They loved all of you, and your mannerisms and
our manners.
Your manners. Your manners.
You and Mom were very good about teaching us manners.
Well, yeah, it's like you just want to be considerate of others.
Yeah. Was that a Japanese thing or your family thing? Manners and...
I think it was unspoken kind of thing because, my mother, because it was important to her that we use hashis.
Chopsticks.
Correctly.
Yeah.
And so, like I've told you guys, the exercise we would do was she had a mason jar full of spare buttons.
Yeah.
And she'd spill them on the kitchen table and said to my older brother and my younger sister, you can go out and play when you put all the buttons back in the mason jar.
Did she do it to you? Did she do that to you?
All of us.
Oh, yeah.
All at one time. So then it taught us, we didn't argue. We just knew that the sooner we get them all back in, we could go out and play.
So it was you, Gary, and Carol.
Correct.
Yeah. And you did that to me.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think you must have noticed that at dinner time, there was, because sometimes we would use forks and sometimes we'd use ohashi. And I think you noticed that I sucked at it. And I remember, did that exact thing to me. And I was like, bummer. But that's literally the only lesson I've ever had. And since then, I can pick up the tofu and the miso soup with delicate ease. Yeah. Which is the ultimate test. I've always been good with chopsticks because of that one day where you took Mom's weird jar with all those mismatched buttons and said, you got to put all these back in the jar and then you can go out. And practice makes perfect, right? Yeah.
That was one of the things that was very important to Mom. So I knew that...
Your mom?
Yeah, my mom. And I knew that whenever she would come over to our house or we would go to her house, that she'd be looking to see how you handled it. It was important to her because it was more formal to do it correctly.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think like what final question I'm going to ask. So then you get the job at Boeing, you come to Seattle, and from what we've talked about before, then suddenly you're around other mixed race couples for the first time.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
But not completely, because it's not like Seattle was overflowing with mixed race, but it was just a little bit more common.
Yeah.
Like black people, white people, Asians, white, you know.
Yes.
Also, you've told me in the past that you have been told by a lot of other mixed race couples in Spokane that when you broke the seal, the others followed suit. You know, they're like, oh, that when you and mom got married and you led the way, it's like, oh, you survived it, and they could see that, and then other couples came out of the woodwork and say, oh, we're dating too, and then they would get married as well.
Yeah, there was quite a few out of our community, church community, that kind of followed our footsteps, I think, in a way, because we were involved in the church and everybody got to know Sue. And they says, wow, you know,
maybe white people aren't so bad.
Yeah, she's quite a nice young lady.
She must have stuck out like a sore thumb.
Oh, yeah.
This like platinum blonde, tall woman.
You know, your mother is quite unique that way. She doesn't see color. She knew that, you know, and I swear she loves Japanese food, maybe even more than I do. So I'm so lucky, you know, when we go out to eat, and she's like right there. I mean, she loves Japanese food.
Yeah. Well, the way that I always saw it was she was young and had never really been independent when you and her were dating and when you got married, and had never developed her own, you know, repertoire regarding food preparation. You know, it was probably just given to her at home, and because her mom liked to cook a lot, right?
Yeah.
So then she gets married, and she's first couple weeks of, okay, I'm supposed to be the housewife, I'm supposed to make dinner. I don't have anything on my list. I don't have a go-to pasta dish or anything. And so she would just turn to you and say, like, what do you want? And you just told her, well, this is what I want, because, you know, those Japanese American dishes that you grew up with your mom.
Uh-huh.
And then mom would just ask grandma, your mom, how do you make curry? How do you make, you know, rice? How do you make Japanese rice? Where do you find it?
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, sooner than, and pretty soon, mom just developed a taste for it, and it sort of locked it in.
Yeah.
And maybe other couples weren't so lucky in that department. Yeah. And, you know, it's not like racism ended after the 60s. So did you experience any kind of comments about being Japanese or being in a mixed race couple in your 20s, 30s, 40s?
Because it was becoming more commonplace, there wasn't so much, especially over here in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Like you say, there was more. So I looked at it as it's more diverse, like you say, more diverse over here than in Spokane. Mm-hmm. So, and it wasn't such an isolated case.
Right. The last question I want to ask from my list of questions is sort of off topic. When I was in my 20s, I started noticing that you would apologize every now and then to me. You know, we would have get-togethers, and then you would call me and say, I want to apologize for something I said, or something like this. It wasn't very frequent, but it would happen every now and then. Do you remember this? And you still kind of do this occasionally. It's not very frequent, but do you know that you do that?
I'm not going to say I can't see myself doing it. I don't recall.
You don't recall
specific times that I did that.
Okay. Because I think it's a good thing, and it was very touching that you would do that, and it is a good example to follow. Because, you know, you get together with people and you're trying to be a good person and not hurt anyone's feelings or humiliate anything, and then, you know, things go mostly well, but on the way home you're just like, oh, why did I say that one thing, or why didn't I listen better that one time? And instead of just sitting on it, you reach out and you're just like, hey, you know, I don't know if this bothered you, but
it's bothering me.
I regret this bit.
Sure.
But you don't remember doing it? Because I felt like it was a campaign that you were on of some kind, because it started kind of suddenly and it didn't fit previous behavior. And it was during my late 20s or something, but you don't remember any of this?
I don't recall. Obviously, if it was something that I made a point of calling,
Yeah.
it was something that was weighing heavy on my mind.
Yeah.
And I says, well, it must be that if I'm thinking about it, maybe he's really thinking about it. So
Yeah.
I could see myself doing something like that.
Uh-huh.
I can't recall any specific times.
Yeah.
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 I mean, and I don't recall doing that.
Well, it's very notable to me because
Uh-huh.
you didn't do that growing up,
Yeah.
to my memory.
Okay.
And then when I was an adult and we didn't live together, I just saw, like, I don't know if it was just a different side of you, or you were growing, or I don't know, maybe you always did that sort of thing. Does it seem like something that you always did? Because it takes a humility and a concern to do that. Most people don't, honestly, in my experience. So were you always like that? Or do you imagine that my observation of you doing it in the 90s was kind of a new development?
Knowing myself, I will oftentimes reflect things I did or said and wonder, why did I say that? And I could see that if it was just want to clear the board and say, maybe give some circumstances on why I said that,
Mm-hmm.
or what I meant by it. I didn't really mean that.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably didn't want to have that be something that you're living with. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was something you would hear, and you say, that didn't come out right. And I could see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to clear that up.
Well, there's a nice through line to me. I try to do that. I don't usually because of the insecurity, I suppose. But also a through line to all my work as a therapist and a podcaster regarding apologies and, giving circumstances, wanting to be humble and set it right, repair relationships. Well, I guess, can you imagine that you did this when you were in your 20s, when you were in your teens? Does it sound like something you would have done back then?
Probably not.
Yeah, it seems like you turned 40 or something, or however old you would have been in the 90s. Yeah, you'd have been around 50, I guess, that you had developed or matured or learned something and decided that you were going to rise above the pride that would be a barrier to admitting that and to reaching out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be something that I could subscribe to. That could be one of the reasons why I called.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I remembered.
Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't very often, but it was notable to me because
Well, which is a good thing, because which means I don't speak out of turn or say something that could be misconstrued.
Yeah.
And I wanted to clear it up.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll say things like, why did I say that?
Mm-hmm.
That's not even in my vocabulary.
Yeah, because I feel like I try to do it, and I find that a lot of people are like, wow, not a lot of people would do that, So I'm following in your footsteps in that way. Just like when you told me to take a dive after a guy that's juking me on the end in football and try to get an ankle, it doesn't take me that long to learn from your example, Dad.
Well, thank you. Anything that's in a positive vibe, then I'm all for it. I'm hoping that I didn't pass on any bad habits or...
Well, dyslexia, that's not appreciated.
No, not by me either. It's not something I would wish on anybody. I'm not quite sure how I was able to function at a very high level despite that.
Yeah.
People out there who suffer from the same thing, it's possible that you can have a good life as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to people who read, like Mom. I mean, she will read 2-3 books a week.
Yeah.
But
I feel like a lot of people are in that direction if they have enough time and space.
Yeah.
Stacy's like that. I can't even read a book if I have the time and space. It's like it's not enjoyable to read a book because it's so painful. So I listen to books on audio,
Yeah, that's a good way.
Yeah. I'm a professor, and I live in a literary world. I've written books. You would think, and people would ask me, like, what's your favorite novel? Or
Yeah.
and I have read some novels, actually read them, but not many. And I never knew what to say, and I always felt like ashamed that I hadn't read a lot of novels and books and stuff, and didn't feel like I was in that world until I think I discovered, self-diagnosed, that at least I have a mild case of some sort of learning disability. And now I just say I have a learning issue. I have a reading issue.
Right.
That makes it so reading actually isn't very enjoyable for me. It's much more work for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Because you don't read novels. Really.
I don't.
Yeah.
I very rarely will finish a book without putting it down and letting it sit for a couple, 3 to 4 days sometimes. And then I'll be prompted by Mom telling me the library's saying it's kind of overdue. So.
Well, you should listen to books on. Have you listened to books on tape?
I have not. No.
You should give that a shot, because listening, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's just reading. Well, what's the final thing you want to say to listeners, Dad? And don't, you don't have to push merch like you did last time.
I would, I want to say hello to Geraldine. I know you're listening.
Yeah.
We love you, and
family member Geraldine.
You're an inspiration to us.
Well, this episode will probably be listened to a lot of family members, because like they listen to Mom's episodes.
Oh, okay.
Well, what do you want to leave the listeners with?
That in my lifetime, I've seen a lot of change. I have a lot of concerns for this country. I think that things will heal. I wish I could encapsulate it in a shorter amount of time, but
You want people to have hope?
I do.
And you want people to try to heal? How?
By seeking professional help, first of all, and that you're not alone. Things can happen. You think you're by yourself and you're experiencing something totally unique. You'll probably be comfortable and in the knowledge that there's others who are going through the same thing. Been there and done that.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you for having me on this podcast. We're proud of you. We love you. And buy that merch.
I love you, Dad.
Thank you, son.
Don't you want to say you love me too?
I love you too, son.
You're usually the one that says you love me first. 99% of the time, I'm the one reciprocating.
I hope that you kids, you hear it a lot from us, and we mean it. And so there's never a doubt in your mind that you're loved.
Yeah, there never has been. Yeah.
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 Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And everyone out there, take care of yourself, because
you deserve it. You really, really do.